Hello and welcome to Share.care's What is Manly radio show and podcast. Men feel more lonely, lost, and not useful in society than ever in history. Males are not attaching to school, work, or women. What it means to be a man appears lost. Is there a framework for being manly that we can unearth?
Welcome to Share.care, an all-inclusive community sharing experience, strength, and hope to create strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships. Share.care communities work toward every individual feeling safe, valued, and heard, free from the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Each episode, founder Damian Andrews explores the principles underpinning Share.care and invites expert special guests to share their knowledge so you can easily reap the benefits so many others experience. You hold the choice to create your future. Let it be with strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships.
G'day, JD. Good to see you again.
Good day, Damien. Good to see you as well. Thanks for bringing me into the Australian continent again.
It's always a pleasure to have you here, JD. And good to see you, as you mentioned before, in daylight hours. And for the audience, JD's the author of the book, Communicate with Mastery, Speak with Conviction, and Write with Impact. He has a lot of great workshops and keynotes and helped a lot of people in the space of speaking more confidently. And on that topic, I mean, for men, it seems to be there's a lot out there at the moment. There are certainly guys, young men, older men that are a bit lost as to what it is to be manly today. There's a lot of polarization. What have you seen in that space, JD? And what's your take on it? And where should we be heading as far as being manly?
It's an interesting adverb, manly.
It is.
I appreciate the plug on my book. But one of the things I say is you don't overuse adverbs. And so we've taken this perfectly good noun, man, and made it into an adverb, manly.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I've been thinking about this question since the invite came in to be on this conversation on the radio and then on the podcast. I'm seeing here in the States kind of a bifurcation of that concept of manliness. There is a toxic manliness that is promoted by a number of people that have their own YouTube shows that kind of prey upon teenage young men, 20-something young men, that is difficult for me to be with. I'm not going to mention any of the promoters of that. I don't want to actually give them more airtime. But there is a conversation right now in the States around manliness in a I rule the house, women listen to me, this is what it needs to look like, that feels like a very 1950s, 1940s, 1930s sort of view of the man of the house. But I'm also seeing a really lovely, I don't know that that's even the right adverb, but a really encouraging conversation around being able to be fully human and embrace our masculinity and be able to be vulnerable, be able to be present to our feelings and the needs of people around us, and yet not diminish the fact that we're guys and this is a part of who we are in the world. So I'm seeing both conversations happen, and I certainly want to further the one that's encouraging, and avoid or eliminate the one that I feel is toxic for young men.
So from that perspective, when you say the encouraging side of conversation, we're talking about furthering that. Do you think part of that conversation centers around, when we talk about empathy, that kind of thing, women certainly have a head start in that area. They've been, in that, guys went out and did the warrior thing, so to speak. And I'm being very general here. So if I get hate mail, that's okay. I don't mind. But from that perspective, that has been the what was the standard, and women stayed home and they looked after the kids, which as a result gave them more empathy. So do you think this is a state of catch up from the perspective of guys, is having that balance of less, stoicism in there, being able to express what's going on for them, rather than, because when you think about that, if you're in a battle situation, and looking at it from my military background, if you get hurt a little bit in the middle of a battle, going, hang on a minute, I need to stop now, because I've got a little scratch on my arm, and I'm overemphasizing this, you're going to get killed. That's just the way it is. You've got to suck it up and keep moving forward. But in doing that, do you think, from that perspective, that stoicism has gone, it's now we're opening up, going, okay, we're in an environment where we're not in these battle situations anymore. We don't need to be in that fight situation to survive. We can be more collaborative. And because now as a humanity we're evolving, it's time for men to play catch up with this, being more empathetic, being more in touch, being able to open up more.
I do think there is, I like your expression, Damien, of catch up. I do think there is a desire among many men to be multifaceted, and to not only be able to be, excellent at work, excellent at sports, excellent at being a dad and being a parent, being a partner to their spouse. And I think that conversation is fueled by some of the great things that we're seeing that women have brought to the workplace. I think of Brene Brown and her remarkable TED Talk that really brought to many of us that the conversations of empathy and vulnerability, moving from shame to grace, is not just for women; it's for all of us. And so I think that we've been given the gift of runway, if you will, that we as men can step into that. And I hadn't thought of it till as often you and I have happened to us, hadn't thought of it till this moment. But I also think the pandemic has enabled all of us to be a bit more human, and bring our we often say here in the States, bring your full self to work. But you know what? When you're working from home and your kids are coming in and out of your office every 10 minutes, that is your full self. And so I think we've been given some grace and space that we can be more human, not just manly, but human, in the way that we as guys operate in our professional settings and our settings outside of the home. We can bring the home more into it.
And this is where I find the conversation really interesting, and I don't like the use of the word norm, and it's bandied around a lot. The norm is, the guy is, doesn't have emotions, doesn't express emotions, doesn't ask for help. And for me, that wasn't my norm. And remember, I was posted to the SAS. The guys there that I was with were pretty tough. That's an understatement, and I'm being facetious when I say pretty tough. They were some of the toughest people around. And they had no problem. We had no problem giving each other a hug. We had no problem. If someone had an issue, they had no problem seeking out advice. They didn't just, cry to anybody, but they said, I've got an issue here, I need to sort that out. Because you had to. If you were to survive, you had to be at your A game all the time in that moment when you needed to be there. So to be at your A game, if you had an issue, you had to deal with it quickly and effectively. So when people had a problem, they were able to express it. But same token too, there was an element of, I remember when I went to parachute school, and the first time I went up in the plane and I come down, I messed up the landing, and because with the military, the very basic military parachutes, it's not like you get to turn around a lot. You got four things: you can either go forwards or backwards. That's it. And I looked down, and I was going backwards, so I pulled down on I think it was right. I pulled on my front risers so that I would slow down to ease the landing. But what happens is I look down and going, okay, I'm stopping. This is cool. But then I started shooting forward, and I'm like, oh my God, what do I do now? But once you're locked in, you're locked in. And I hit the ground, rolled over, and thumped into the ground. And I thought, there's no way in hell I'm going up again. I'm not doing that. I'm not, because when that initial shock, and I'm not doing this again. And then after I got, pulled up my chute, got back with all the other guys there, and I'm thinking about it. And then my ego kicked in and said, I can't tell them I'm not going. I wasn't injured. It was just my own fear.
Yeah.
And so in that moment, me not complaining about it or going, oh, I can't do this, I actually got up and I went up again, and I had a perfect landing. And I did many jumps after that, night jumps. Everything was great. Although night jumps are really scary when you can't see the ground and you're going to hit it. So, but from that perspective, so when we're looking at it, I'm going, well, there's an element of, we need to have that balance of being able to open up. These guys could open up. And I'm just wondering what it was, from that side of things, because I look at it with that empathy. And bringing it back to that commercial you mentioned about, women have opened up so much. I know with the negotiation program that I teach, the best negotiators in the world come from a woman's perspective, from an empathetic perspective, an understanding, a listening perspective. They're the most powerful negotiators. So I was just relaying that in a kind of two-pronged way of going, well, there's an element of one side where you need to have that ability to go, hey, I need to just step it up here and take that on board. But also too, having that empathy gives you a lot more power as well. And how do you think we integrate that as guys? Is it a case of some people have just naturally done that, or we just need to have more conversation about it?
I think if anything, we are less prepared to have that.
Right.
You said a moment ago, women kind of have a leg up on us, and for all of our listeners out there, we're talking in generalities right now.
Yeah.
But the reason we do that is they oftentimes hold a lot of truth. The conversation about what it takes to be able to be a vulnerable leader, an open leader, somebody who is not command and control, following boys, this is the way we're going to do it. That is something that is just recently in the last 10 to 15 years been widely taught in business schools, and many people have never had those conversations, many men who are founding and leading companies, and so I think that, or being hired into companies. So I think we do have to slow down and have very specific, very intentional conversations about why this is valuable as a leader, to be able to build the skill of empathy as one of the tools in your toolkit, and to understand it, and to bring that out in the others that you have the privilege of leading. And it's a relatively new conversation.
Yeah. Do you think we need to put some further definitions around certain words we use, vulnerable in particular? And I'm raising that because, and a lady raised this to me, said, you should not be vulnerable ever. You shouldn't be vulnerable, because what that means is you are completely defenseless. And if you're defenseless, you're going to get slaughtered. You should go in with education and wisdom. You should be open, but not vulnerable, which was a different conversation. I hadn't heard that, certainly not coming from a woman. Do you think we need to do that? Because I don't think, and when that was put to me, I thought about it, as you and I often do. We think about the things that this is said. I went, I haven't heard that from that perspective. Vulnerability, I see as being open and receptive. But when I thought about that, I believe I'm a very good listener and I listen a lot. But I've never been in a situation where I've been completely defenseless in that position. Where if someone had attacked and I've had that, all of a sudden I'm ready and I'm prepared to address that. And I'm not talking like well, in a physical sense, yes, but I'm more talking from the perspective of an education perspective. If someone attacks me and says, "Oh no, your point of view is wrong," or "You don't know what you're talking about," I'm ready to defend myself or defend my position. So I'm not completely vulnerable, and I never had when I looked at it from that perspective. Do you think
Well,
we need to put a framework around that as well?
I'm gonna uh, politely disagree with the woman who had the
That's the point
conversation
of
with
what we're
you,
doing here.
and I'm going to Brene Brown, who I think
Yeah.
is one of the best thought leaders on this,
Mm.
and one of her quotes is, "Vulnerability is our most accurate way to measure courage.
Yeah.
Vulnerability allows us to assess fearlessness, and we can measure how brave you are by how vulnerable you're willing to be." And vulnerability is that sense of embracing the uncertainty,
Mm.
being okay with the risk, being willing to be emotionally exposed, and that is valuable for leaders, whether they're men or women, uh,
Yeah.
regardless of gender. Let me put it that way,
Yeah.
because certainly we know people who identify across a whole spectrum there. But for this conversation with this audience, what is manly? I think it is manly
Mm.
to be able to take the risk of being vulnerable. Now, where I would agree with that woman who spoke with you is, you can be vulnerable without being weak. Vulnerable does not mean
Mm.
weak. And
Okay.
so, to be strategic about your vulnerability, to be thoughtful and careful about your vulnerability, from a communication point of view, which is my area of expertise, I talk to people about being able to do this without giving up power in the situation. And
Yeah.
that, I think, is the crucial skill and the crucial conversation that our leaders need to engage in. And the and so, yes, you started this by saying, do we need to define terms?
Mm.
Yes,
Mm.
I would take Brene Brown's definition of vulnerability as a way to measure courage and being able to embrace the uncertainty. That's what we mean by vulnerable.
I think from what I'm hearing from you and from what I heard from that previous conversation as well, you're both saying the same things, and I love what you said there. You can be vulnerable without being weak, and you're being able to do this in a way without giving up power. So that's
Yeah.
not, and so that's not being defenseless, which is what the lady was referring to. So you're going to a situation where you're completely defenseless, because I haven't looked it up. She looked up the word vulnerable. It says you're defenseless, and she should never be defenseless. But your definition of being able to do this without giving up power, that's
Yeah.
not defenseless either.
Not at all. Not at all. In fact, um, I think it is a sign of power
Mm.
to acknowledge our vulnerability in a
Yeah.
situation, and to be able to acknowledge, yeah, there is a certain amount of risk in this decision. I don't know how this is going to play out, but here's the decision I've made, and this is the direction we're going to take. and
Mm.
and I can do that and still be regarded as an effective leader. Now, I could do the same thing and lose complete credibility and power with the people
Mm.
that I'm leading. You know, oh my God, I have no idea if this is going to work out or not. I don't know. I'm just taking a wild guess here, but we're going to go in this direction.
Yeah.
Like, no, we're not. I'm not following that guy. And so part of it is who we're being as we're being
Mm.
vulnerable, and part of it is what we're
Ooh.
saying and doing in that moment of vulnerability. And it can be an incredibly attractive quality if somebody is that accurate in their own self-assessment.
So I love that what you said about it's about who we're being in that moment of vulnerability. If
Yeah.
we want to take that a bit deeper, what do you mean by that? Who we're being? Is that who we are as a person? We identify ourselves as? What do you mean by who we're being?
I see it as it's an inside job. It is, what do I need to do before I open my mouth or before I my fingers go to the keyboard, and understanding my intentions, understanding my goals,
Mm,
what's going to work for me here, what's not going to work for me here. It is that being a conscious leader, and that
mm.
consciousness is that self-assessment.
Yeah. Okay.
And
So you've met. Go ahead.
yeah, and so I think that's that deeper level of that internal self-awareness
Mm.
before I start speaking or writing to try to have people follow the direction that I believe we should go into.
So from that perspective of understanding who we are and understanding your intentions and goals, what would, like, from the perspective of being manly, is that, how would someone go about identifying what their intentions are, who they are, what their goals are? And it's probably, I mean, it applies to both genders, but we're talking about being manly here.
Yeah, I think at one level it's a self-understanding, it's a self-awareness,
Mm,
and where that's murky or unclear, that's the value of a coach or a mentor.
yeah.
To be able to, and again, my view is primarily from the US. I have been impressed with the US presidents of both parties that have acknowledged that before a very major decision, they will call former presidents and get advice, because only somebody
Mm,
who has sat in the Oval Office and has made
yeah.
decisions to send soldiers to war or drop bombs understands the weight and the gravity of those decisions. And that is a level of checking your assumptions, checking your intentions, and having
Mm,
somebody who will speak truth to power and be able to advise you. And so as a leader in a firm, or a leader in a nonprofit or in a movement, I need to be sure I've got a few people around me that can be that level of coach, mentor, guide, ask me the right questions, help me really clarify my intention, so that I don't step out into a campaign or into a product launch or a merger or an acquisition without a a with my ego guiding what we're
mm.
doing, rather than my intention for the firm, for the industry, for the movement.
Yeah, that's
And
really.
I think that's a skill that, again, it's not showing weakness,
Mm.
but I don't think we are as good at encouraging men to do that as we could be.
Yeah, I love that. That we need to be encouraging people, because I've never had a problem asking for help, but I've been very selective of who I ask for help,
Yeah.
being very
Yeah.
careful about the people that I'm seeking. I want to just before, I've only got a few minutes left for the radio part of this show, but I wanted to step back and about this knowing who you are and your intentions. Do you think part of the problem being is that we've got so many people saying, oh, this is what it should be, and people, men really just need to say, well, this is who I am and I'm comfortable with that, and we need to be encouraging men to make their decision as to who they are, regardless of what the wider world might think of that?
I believe so. I believe so. And I think uh there is a growing movement, in both countries,
Mm,
of a regard for people who do that internal work,
right.
and can then share it out. Uh, there's, before we lose the end of the radio, I want to mention two websites in particular. One is called The Daily Stoic, by I listen to him every day, by Ryan Holiday. And we think of stoicism as like showing no feeling whatsoever. And what Ryan has been able to do, and he's got millions of followers, is to be able to really look at what is the wisdom that we can benefit from, and what are other primarily men who are engaging in this sort of self-analysis. Ryan also has a podcast called The Daily Dad, which I listen to religiously. If 5 days a week, I get 3 or 4 minutes of his guidance around being a great dad.
Yeah.
And sure, it's awesome lessons for women, but much like your broadcast, he focuses on this is what I want to do. I want to help men be better dads.
Yeah.
And he's just one of hundreds of voices that are out there. But being able to embrace and make it comfortable for people to embrace what's going on. It is a really good opportunity to be able to see that and do that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, we need to I think there's a lot of that information out there that we want to put in. I'll put those in the show notes as well. And we're going to have to wind this up now for the radio viewers. But one of those things we wanted to touch on is identifying how we need to make decisions. Because one of the things that I've always thought was that we've actually got to the stage where people used to have decisions made for them. Now we've got all this freedom, but we haven't taught people how to make the decisions, and we need to identify who they are. But we do need to wind up now for the radio listeners. But if you want, we're going to continue the conversation. So if you want more of this for the radio listeners, just tune into the podcast and you'll get the rest of this.
Thank you all for listening as a part of the radio. It was great.
And we continue on. So with that, and this is part of life. We were talking about that in the pre-show about things happening and the life moving on. And I saw a little bit of life happening for you there as well, where you had, I think it was one of your young children come in and say g'day while you were trying to do your talk.
Exactly. And it was right at the end of the radio. I was like, oh, just 60 more seconds. It would be okay. But yes, it's here in the States, it's 5 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. And my 4-year-old came in to show me his Frisbee that he bought at the hardware store with his other dad while they were out. And it's like, I want to see it, but I need to see it in 45 minutes, not right now. So, but
I wanted to, and the reason I brought that up is because I wanted to highlight that for people listening as well, that, you're a dad, you've got a number of children, and, you're trying to do your work, which is have a conversation with me. Your son comes in and you have that conversation and we make it work. But as a man, it's not like, oh, I can't do that. You addressed it and dealt with that. And that's why I wanted to highlight that for guys out there, that we can manage this. We can actually multitask.
Yeah. Well, and it's really funny because I'm not sure if I brought this up the last time we talked, but remember 4 or 5 years ago, before the pandemic, and there was the man who was being interviewed on the BBC, and his kids interrupted behind him in the interview. And it was, and his wife came in and pulled them out and closed the door and all this. And it was this huge, like, global incident. Can you believe that these kids walked in on their dad while he was doing a BBC interview? And now it's like, boy, if I can get through an interview with only one interruption, it's a victory, And I think how quaint it was that we were shocked, clutching our pearls that, these kids walked in on their dad.
But do you think, when we talk, oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
And I was going to say, and what gives me confidence in this is that I also know that when I spend time with my kids, I am focused and they fully get dad's attention. And if I start to go to my phone, they will call me on it. They'll be like, Dad, you said this was our time. Put away your phone. I'm like, yeah, but I got to confirm my appointment with Damien. Like, no, you said this is about me. And I know that when I'm with them, I'm fully with them. So
Yeah.
when I can't be with them, I don't carry guilt about that. And certainly, if my child was bleeding outside my office door,
Mm.
yeah, we would have stopped the interview.
Yeah.
And so I can make those choices, but I know that he knows he matters to me. And every night, both of my little
Mm.
kids, they go to sleep knowing they're loved, they're cared for, and they are the focus of their dad's attention, both their dad's attention.
Do you
My
think
older one, he's 24. We have those conversations regularly, but not every night before bed.
Do you think that side of things, because when we're talking about what is manly, because I look at that from my perspective, and as you said, you've got your children there, you set your time and you give them focus, and also too when you've got to do something, they're mindful of that. And I know I've done the same with my son as well. There'd be times where, I mean, when I give him a lot of focus, then there's times where he's come to me while I'm doing something, and whether it's an interview or not, I might be just writing a report, and I say, hey, I need to finish this. I'll come back to you in a minute. Just give me a moment. And he's been very respectful of that because I've then gone and seen him. But we have this nice balance where we have a high respect for each other.
Yeah.
Do you think part of that is also too when we look at it, when we look at the stereotypical relationship, it was always the mum with the children. The dad really didn't deal with the children much, so maybe they lacked the skill to be able to do that. Again, I was fortunate because my mum was very much involved in making me involved in what would be considered womanly things at that time. When I grew up I was born in this early 70s, and my mum made a choice to work from home, not work from home, to be a home mum, and to the extent of when my mum and dad split up, her focus was, I want to look after my children. She didn't date. She deliberately did not date because she said she didn't want her children to have some uncles in the house, was her term. So, and to me, that was a massive sacrifice. I mean, and we're talking dad didn't date. That's 10 years because there was I've got younger siblings. She didn't do any dating until they were older. And that was at least 10 years. I couldn't imagine that. But that's a level of commitment. But do you think from that perspective, because I look at it and go, well, I naturally deal with that because my mum got me involved with doing all the housework and things like that. Do you think it's another step of that training where the guys are a little bit behind and we're catching up in this whole, we can balance the children, we can be involved in the children's lives, we can connect to the same emotional level with the children as the women were doing when they're looking after the home?
I believe we can. And I believe there are more examples of men doing that
Mm,
than men not doing that. At
yeah.
least in the circles I run in and the conversations that I hear people have, um, there are uh, there are great examples of men who have chosen to put family first or be clear in compartmentalizing what is
Mm,
family time, what is work time, and I think the more that we hear examples of that, the more that we hear stories of that, the more that we make it, and to use the word we didn't want to use, we make it the norm. That that men are involved. Wherever you're at, you're fully present and you're fully involved,
yeah.
and that we really break down the stereotype that our parents may have given us or our
Mm,
grandparents may have given us about women's work and men's roles and these traditional heteronormative roles that break down. Now, I'm in a gay relationship, and so our kids are growing up with two dads and women that are around, but in terms of their full commitment comes from two men, and and yet most of the families I interact with are straight families that are hitting the same challenges. They've
mm,
both parents have jobs, both parents have demands, and they're both trying to be great parents to the kids that they're blessed to raise. And so it is rare that it becomes a conversation about men versus women. It's
mm.
common that it becomes a conversation about, okay, who in your family handles the schedule? Who in your family make sure the bills are paid. And who in your
Yeah.
family is great in the moment, to come up with a celebration where there was nothing planned. And so those are the roles that I end up seeing families uh, navigate or figure
Mm.
out more than traditional gender-based parenting roles.
Do you think that's
There's
from? Oh, go ahead.
there's a story here that I think is instructive around this, around we as dads being present to our kids
Mm.
in a manly way. Um, there was I heard this at a conference one time about a man who went to his son's little league basketball game
Mm.
and was there in the stands, but was on his iPhone, handling emails and doing work sort of stuff. And after the game was over, was walking out with his son and said, "Great game, son." And the kid looked up and said, "I didn't know that it was being broadcast on your phone." And the guy was like, "Oh man." And from that conversation forward, he left his phone in the glove box of the car when he went to one of his son's games. It
Wow.
wasn't even a temptation because he didn't bring it into the game so that he could watch his son play or watch
Mm.
his son sit on the bench. But be there. If you're going to be there, then just really be there. Don't be there and be half there.
Yeah, and I know that's not just a man thing. That's not a gender
Yeah.
specific thing. That happens a lot. I always find it ironic when I hear the parents complaining about the use of their kids using the phone all the time while they're texting something to somebody at the same time. I want to come back to this as you said, because you said from your observation that there's a lot of involvement of men within with the children, that kind of thing, and I wanted to explore that from the side of things from your reticular activating system, law of attraction. We see what we want to see. Do you think that there is a lot more out there than of men being involved? Because when I look back at my childhood, as I said, my mum was she stayed at home. That was a choice that she made. My dad worked. But my dad was always involved. I remember him being involved. I remember him coming, picking me up from scouts, walking me home, and I'm trying to take the same length steps because I wanted to be like my dad. And he would take me to cricket, he'd take me to footy, so he'd get up early and take. So he was involved with that and doing, and with 4 children too. There was, I mean, obviously that needed to be shared, especially when you start going to sports at different locations, that kind of thing. And I raised that too because last night I went to the movies with my son. We went and watched the 65 movie. Great movie. Check it out if you haven't seen it. It's really awesome. And the trailer is just the first part of the movie. There's all this stuff that comes in later. Really cool. But what I noticed when I was walking out, and it stood out to me, I think since I've started doing this particular podcast, I've noticed it more. But as we were walking to the car park, I noticed a couple walking with a young baby. Now, the woman was pushing the pram. The pram was empty, and the dad was carrying the baby. So he was holding the baby. The baby could have been in the pram if the dad didn't want to touch the baby. That could have been in the pram, or if the baby was crying and needed to be held, the mum could have been pushing the pram, could have been holding the baby while the dad was pushing the pram, or she could have even been doing it. But this dad, I noticed he was involved, and he was the one coddling the baby as they were walking. And I'm just wondering, is there more out there of that? And some, there's some extremism stuff that's being put out because that, gets press. Do you think that's where we're at, where there's more of it out there than we're actually noticing of dads being involved?
I like to think so, and
Mm.
I think you're right that part of this could be selective viewing. We pick
Mm.
up, you decide you're going to buy a BMW. All of a sudden, you see a lot of BMWs on the
Yeah.
road. You decide you want to be a more engaged dad. All of a sudden, there's a lot more engaged dads that you see there. But I believe that it has things have shifted
Mm.
generationally.
Yeah.
That we are there is an openness and an appetite for people who will make those sorts of difficult decisions about balancing work and family.
Mm.
And we still have a ways to go. I'm
Yeah.
not naive about it.
Mm.
And certainly, I mean, your podcast viewers, especially those who hang in there that come off the radio show and go for the extra hour with us, there may be, differing opinions about
Mm.
what they see from their experience. But I think there is space for and encouragement of men choosing to be fully engaged in all the areas of their
Mm.
life.
Yeah.
And I believe, I do think it's generational.
Mm.
I'm a little older than you. I was born in the 1960s, but I'm a baby boomer because my dad was a World War II vet.
Yeah.
And my dad definitely raised us old school. There was
Mm.
women's work and men's work. And my mom had a full-time job and did all the cooking, all the cleaning,
Yeah.
all the shopping. And then as my sisters and I started raising our own families, we're like, that actually doesn't work that well. And there needs to be a choice for how you're
Mm.
going to arrange, what works in your household. And so, but I think there's a lot more appetite for that now than there used to be.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it certainly makes things a lot easier. I know from my perspective, I've always loved being involved from the very beginning when my son was born. Always wanted to be involved in what he was doing, and at times fought to make sure that I did stay involved in that, because it's so meaningful, and you do have a deeper connection and a much better relationship. And it has also helped my relationship with my dad as well. My dad and I get along fantastically now. We didn't always, but there was certainly when I was younger, there was this admiration. Then you go through the teenage phase, and there was obviously my
Yeah.
parents splitting up, which had an impact as well. Um, but I mean, let's come back to what you started with, and you talked about there was some people on the other side, creating. What was the note that I made? The
Toxic
toxic,
masculinity.
yeah, toxic, yeah. So the promoting, and well, toxic masculinity is something where, I mean, I'm still yet to try and understand what that is from a male specific behavior. I mean, when I look at the definition of, or maybe let's not go there with that. What I wanted to go, we can come back to that if we need to, but what I wanted to go with is, what do you think is the attraction to that? Because when we look at, I mean, do you think we lack, strong male role models? Because from what I've seen, the ones that are popular, and there was one in particular where I looked at, and I'll raise this because there was an article in one of the major publications, news publications here, about a particular gentleman. I'll use the term loosely, who has a reputation for being a misogynist. And an organization did a survey, apparently, and it said that there was 90-something% of young boys had heard of him. 50-something% could identify with him on topics. So I wanted to get a bit more detail about that. So I contacted the organization that said they did the survey, and I asked for a copy of the survey. It took 2 months, but I eventually got it. And when I got the survey, what it showed was the areas that the boys identified with. A lot of them thought his views on women were wrong. There was a very strong percentage that said, we don't agree with his views on women. But same token too, there was the ones that did identify with him, when they look at what the specific things they identified, was that he had a strong point of view. He took care of himself physically. He was fit. And the only point of view where they actually agreed with his views on women, I think it was about 15% said they agreed with his views on women. But when you looked at what they were agreeing with, the comment that they were agreeing with was that he had said, understanding women is confusing. And that was the only point. Not women are less or anything like that. Just trying to understand. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit. That's not the exact word, but it was understanding women is confusing. So there's two elements to that. Well, firstly, let's put aside the side that this was But do you think it's about having a strong role model to follow? Whereas in that space of, what is manly, are there enough strong role models in this space where that say, okay, this is what it needs to be, that stand out, as opposed to now you've got these people because this person was misogynistic, but the young men weren't identifying with that component. They're identifying with these other components where he was fit, he had a strong point of view, all those kind of things. Do you think we need more of those role models out there, as in on the good side?
Yeah, I do believe we need that, and I do think that there's a vacuum right
Mm,
now of role models, and particularly I look at it for my 24-year-old son.
mm,
There's a vacuum of role models for men in their late teens, early 20s that will gravitate to one of these influencers who is espousing a misogynistic message, but doing it in a persona that's incredibly attractive, both
mm.
physically fit but charismatic and lots of followers
Money,
and
all that kind of, yeah.
yeah, and I do think we need some voices that respond back to that, and that are not, engaged in that toxicity. But yeah, there is a gravitational pull. There are advertisers who want at that 25 to 35 or 15 to
Mm.
25 market, and there are um, young people who fall prey to that because there is this hype and there's this energy and there's this draw to it. Unfortunately, and I'm going to step away from the influencers for a moment. People who specifically just live as a YouTube influencer or TikTok influencer. But unfortunately, many of our professional athletes aren't exhibiting the kind of manliness that I hope your listeners are shooting for. And those stars often get held up as, who somebody wants to grow up to be like. And then, we see them do dreadful things in terms of their treatment of women, their treatment of
Mm.
people on their staff, and the language they use, and the lifestyle that they lead. And it's like, no, we do need some people who are positive role models for young men at that age level, who do have the fitness and the following, but who are not engaging in misogynistic behavior. One counterexample that I think is useful to note. One of the podcasts that I really love here in the States is My First Million, and you're familiar with it. Yeah, the two
Uh,
podcasters, Sean and Sam, are I think they're playful. I think they're funny. They can be vulgar once in a while. They can be irreverent once in a while. But I think they're really hyping a sense of entrepreneurship, a sense of business leadership that is like, I can listen to their podcast and send it to my son Toby and say, "Hey, did you catch this episode?" And they could say something in their language with their examples that would resonate so much more for my 24-year-old son than me saying the same thing. The
mm.
dad wearing the sweater vest.
Yeah,
Like that's not
exactly.
who I'm not who he wants to be.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think we need some guys to step up who can, like, give a counterbalance in the media, in the social media, and like I said, there's a vacuum, and if we can get some men who will fill that, that's awesome. The other one that I have just recently, and this is probably a slightly younger age, but I just recently saw the YouTuber Mark Rober. Do you know Mark
Mm.
Rober? He is a
No.
former NASA scientist, and he
Mm.
does remarkable YouTube that is about science, but
Mm.
it's also like, he built the world's largest Hot Wheels track. He built the world's largest volcano,
Mm,
man-made volcano that you do the chemical mixture and it shoots up. And my 4-year-old son and my 7-year-old daughter, like they love to watch him with me. And we
mm,
need some influencers like that who are still going to push the envelope, but are going to do it in a way that helps us as parents, as adults in society, mentor and bring up young men who want to engage with life without that toxicity.
yeah, I love that. Do you think from that perspective of, because I want to come back to what you were talking about, the vulnerability, and there's two elements I want to talk about here is this vulnerability of being able to put yourself out there. Do you think we've got, I don't want to use a W word, but without defining it, I'm going to have to use it, is woke. I just, do you think we've got to this stage where there's so much out there where if someone steps out, they're going to get no, if you have an opinion on anything, it seems to be there's going to be a barrage of insults coming from there. Do you think it has come back to the point of we're lacking that correct, where the people out there in that toxic space, they've got an opinion, not saying it's a great opinion, but they've got an opinion. Whereas other people are more cautious, they don't want to say anything. And if you don't stand for something, as the quote goes, just not standing for anything. Do you think it is that stage where we need to say, hey, this is what I stand for? And, if you don't like it, just that's, that's your opinion. And there are people that do like it. Do you think we need to have that in that framework of the role models out there that just have to stand up and say, hey, this is what manliness is to me?
Yes, I completely agree with you, Damien. I think we need that.
Mm,
And I also think it's interesting that many of the influencers I listen to that my son Toby, my 24-year-old, would also listen to, um, have acknowledged they don't read the comments on their own posts. They they don't care
yeah,
about being attacked for being too woke or not woke enough. Like,
yeah.
you can get beat up from either
I
side
want to
on
know what
the
the
question
test
of
is. I
wokeness.
mean, if I'm going to be an accountant, I've got to, if I'm going to say I'm an accountant, I've got to have done a test. I want to know what the test is to know that you're actually
Yeah.
insightful.
Um,
Sorry.
and I think that they find ways to put themselves out there for the stuff that matters to them,
Mm,
and almost almost a disregard for how it lands. Uh,
mm,
that um, the less concerned I am about what people think about me,
mm,
um, the more I can stand in my own truth and
yeah,
be able to share that.
yeah. I think because that's one thing I wanted to discuss was, from that side of things, I find that, if you can have an opinion and still be respectful about it, which I think should fit within that framework. Having respect, as a man, I try and have respect for everybody, whether I agree with their opinion. They could be complete opposite of what I think is right, but I still try and respect the person. I might not agree with their opinion, I might not respect their opinion, but I try and chunk it up to that high level of person. Do you think as well, when we're looking at that, and I love the quote that you mentioned earlier, that you're being able, when we're talking about vulnerability, it says being able to do this without giving up your power. Now, I know when they did the research, and you'll remember this because you're similar age to me, is remember He-Man, yeah,
Yeah,
for those
1980.
just listening, there's a big smile on JD's face. It was interesting having a look at how that show came about, and it was actually the first show where they did marketing into what was wanted, and they studied young boys, and what they found was young boys were all about power. They wanted power back because their mum was always telling them what to do, and they wanted power. So they actually structured He-Man's tagline was "I have the power." And they structured it around that. And that's part of the reason it became a huge success. And actually, what made it not a success, it was it just skyrocketed. It was one of the most successful
Yeah.
toy brands. And then it plummeted as soon as they introduced She-Ra, because she had the power too. And all of a sudden the guys didn't have, or the boys didn't have the power anymore. This concept of power seems to be scary for some people as well. Do you think, from that perspective, we need more discussion about what power is as well? Because if we look back, I mean, when you looked at a true warrior, the symbol of a warrior was a spear with a broken spear, meaning that they had the power to do that, but they didn't unless it was absolutely necessary. The meek shall inherit the earth. Meek is not weak. Meek is meek from the original Greek is great power under control. Do you think we need more education around what it is to be powerful?
I like that. Meek is great power under control.
Yeah, that's the original Greek version. And because I always had problems with being a Polish and or part Polish and growing up with the Catholic upbringing. The Bible is not about being meek. It's not, robes drenched in blood is not a meek person. And so I always had a problem with that. And then someone explained to me it was meek. The original Greek meaning was great power under control. And a friend of mine, neighbor who lives across the road, he's a former pastor, and I raised that with him, and he goes, "Yeah, that's exactly what it means. That's the true Bible meaning is great power under control." So is that more of a conversation that because people seem to be fearful of power, but power is, well used. It's like a pen. You can poke someone's eye out of it, and go ahead. Sure.
No, I think that's exactly right. I think being able to be powerful and not need to use it physically or violently is an incredible gift.
Yeah.
And to be one that can guide a community to make a peaceful choice instead of a violent choice. But you've chosen peace not because you're unable to fight, but because you're unwilling
I love that.
To do that. And again, I think there are lots of positive examples of this, and I think we've got a lot of work that we need to do in this area to be able to have our young men grow up knowing that, this is an option. This is a choice that's available to you to do this differently.
Yeah, I love that. So you've chosen peace not because you're unable to fight, but you're unwilling to. I love that. And I mean, because I raised that and I was having this, it was an interesting discussion I was having. My son does I've done martial arts. My son does martial arts. His sensei's, my son's sensei, he's a 7th Dan black belt in karate, but he also works both with perpetrators and victims of, of violent incidents. He spends a lot, he works with the police, the courts, and he works with a lot of people in that space. And his primary teaching is it's defense only. You do not, it's about self-control, it's about discipline, it's about managing yourself. And he has, 5 Ds for resolution. The first one is distance. I won't go through all the detail, but so it's all the whole point is the second one is defense, but that's your own self-defense. So when there's a conflict situation, whether it's physical or could be verbal or whatever that situation is, your defense is to be in control of yourself as to how you react. And so and I was having that discussion with one of the prominent leaders in Australia in the space of female violence against women, and he was citing research that martial arts is bad. And I'm thinking, that just didn't compute to me. I was going, yes, if you're and I'm yet to find a reasonable dojo that would even teach that. All of them are about defense first or self-control, discipline. And that's why I was wondering, do we need more of that conversation about, as you said, you've chosen peace because not because you're unable to do something different, but because that's what you want.
Yeah.
Do you think we need more about that conversation and coming back to those role models?
Yeah, I think we do. And I think we we are blessed when in our schools, especially our grade schools, we can have a mix of men and women teachers,
Mm.
uh, and that there be an opportunity for young men to grow up seeing that there are people they can look up to who can be manly and be manly in a way that is righteous and that is esteemable.
Mm.
uh, and I think that's crucial. I think that's and I love, again, I don't know what is available in Australia, but I love here in the States the Teach for America, where people will spend 2 years, almost like a Peace Corps, teaching in some of the most difficult schools in our country, um, and both men and women who will step into those roles. There's another nonprofit here in the Bay Area. I can't think of their name right now, but um, their goal is to be sure that before a student graduates from the San Francisco public school system, that they have at least one black male teacher before they graduate, and
Mm.
ideally before they graduate 8th grade, but certainly before they graduate high school. And
Right.
it's just that idea of being sure that we have people in front of our young people that go, oh, there's another way that I can be manly here than what I was thinking about or what I've seen on TV or what I've seen on social media. And I think that's how we counteract it.
Mm. And do you think part of that role model, this courage, is coming back to that vulnerability side of things? Vulnerability seems to be, from my perspective anyways, is about listening, about being aware of who you are. Do you think we need more of that within the role model as well, the framework we're working towards of we need to listen. We need to courage is listening, being able to listen to the other. We might not agree with the other person's point of view, but actually, if we listen, we might learn
Yeah.
something to help us. Do we need that more in the role model, and how would we do that?
Well, and that I think is one of the key skills of being an empathetic leader, is
Mm.
being able to not just hear, but to listen, and not to listen for ammunition for me to win the argument,
Ooh,
but listen to understand that person's point of view. When I teach
yeah,
listening skills, I talk about that the most valuable tool in our toolkit is the open-ended question.
yeah.
Tell me more about that. Can you tell me a story so I can understand this better, because it's not something I'm familiar with? Is there a story that from your life or from a life of somebody around you that demonstrates this? And then shut up and let the person talk. That skill of active listening and open-ended questions to ask the other person to explain and to clarify is a crucial skill that we do need to encourage and we do need to have.
I love what you
Right.
said there about.
Damien,
Sorry.
we have to let your listeners know we're being interrupted by my 4-year-old again. Hey, but
Hello,
I'm
come and join. Come
almost
and say
done.
hello. Come and say hello.
Can you sit there quietly?
Hello.
My iPad's in the house. Okay, say hi to my friend Damien.
Come and
Say
say
hi,
hi.
wait.
Hello. How are you?
Yeah.
This is JD's son. What's your name?
What's your name?
Joshua, but where is he?
Where are you,
Joshua.
Damien?
I'm in Australia, Melbourne, Australia. Where are you?
Where's that? Who's that?
Oh, he's seeing the man behind you in the image.
Oh, yes, that's a man who's finding his way. He needs to find where he's going and needs to find what's right for his life.
And there's Joshua now.
Where's
Yeah.
the man?
He
Yeah.
lives in the place where Bluey is from. Our favorite cartoon is Bluey. And he lives in the place where Bluey is from. All right, Daddy's almost done. Go with Papa. Go with Papa. Daddy's almost done.
I love that. Such a beautiful boy. Thank you for bringing him on the show.
Well, it was unintended, but we're talking about being present to our kids. I can't leave them outside.
Yeah. No, and I think this is the point we're getting to. And part of that flexibility, we need to be accepting of that as well. I think we all can, and it's part of that life. What I wanted to continue on with that conversation though is, and that was really powerful for me. It was really powerful what you just said, was you're listening not for ammunition. And I know
Yeah.
I've been very guilty of that. I've been very good at listening, but at the same token too, I'm making little mental notes in my head. Oh, how can I use this to win that, win an argument later on? But really, it's that genuine listening to understand, to put yourself in the shoes. And I love when the debates that I've been part of, where the teacher would find out what was your point of view first, and then make you argue the other side.
Yeah, I love that technique. I love that technique.
Yeah, so it really makes you wake up. But what I find from that perspective, and maybe this is more of the conversation we need to have with respect of the framework that we're looking for, and also the role models, is this component of that it is actually really powerful to step into the other person's shoes. You can learn more. And from the perspective of where we are in the world today, because we've moved more from a we've moved away from a zero-sum game in the world.
Yeah.
The Industrial Revolution made the world a positive-sum game. So innovation is where the power is, where you make the pie bigger. And so from that perspective, the way you innovate is understand the other person's point of view. And from that, you can actually combine that with what you know, and then innovation happens. Do you think we need more conversation about that? And that is powerful, that is courage, and that is actually helpful to you evolving and moving forward. And how would we do that?
I think I definitely think we need that. In terms of how we accomplish that, I'm not sure. I think we need those conversations. I think we need those role models. I think we need those examples in our schools, in our companies, in our organizations. But how to execute on that, I'm not sure. And so I think I guess we just need to make some errors, make some do some experimentation and see what sticks. But as an innovative leader, as a compassionate leader, to be able to test out and try some things that allow, again, to show some vulnerability and say, I know where I want to head here. I'm not sure how to get there. Let's try to get there together.
I love what you just said about make some errors. And that's, I mean, great leaders have always taken that bold step, and sometimes they're wrong, and you just correct and move forward and keep moving forward. Does that come back to having an intention as well? We're swinging back, we're going in, I love how we're going in circles, coming back to, it seems to be the same thing, having a clear intention and knowing what your intention is, as a framework for being manly.
Yeah, and I think that is a key tenet of being an effective leader, is knowing your intention, and then represencing back to that intention when things get off track, or when things get complicated, and or when things get contentious. It's like, okay, what is my intention here?
Yeah.
Okay, and then that again, I think, is the value of a coach or a mentor, that you're able to test some stuff out with and say, man, this meeting just didn't go the direction I wanted it to go. I really wanted to force an outcome, but I could tell people weren't ready for that. And to be able to have somebody you can check that with and develop another strategy, move in a different direction, but still go back to that intention. And the thing about intentions is that they're often long range, it's I may have an intention within a given meeting that I close a sale, or I get a purchase order from you, But my longer range intention is a relationship, is an ongoing partnership that benefits both of us. And so intentions are broader than just tactics in a specific meeting or a specific conversation.
I love that. You're looking for benefiting both of us. I'm just making that note as well. The longer range intentions. And maybe that's where we need to have that focus, is because I look at it, and I'm swinging back to this. I look at my dad, for example. My dad worked for the same organization his entire life. That was the expectation. And now we're in a situation, and it was just that was just what was done. So he didn't need to make a decision as to what he did with his life. He was in that area.
Yeah.
He got a job in one of the big organizations there. He worked his way through that and improved, what he was doing, and was constantly studying. But it was never a consideration to do anything different from within that space. Yet now we have we do have infinite decisions effectively. But are we teaching people, are we teaching men how to make their decision as to what their intention is? Because you can be anything in the world I probably couldn't be a jockey, but well, Melbourne Cup winning jockey. I'm a little bit tall for that. But within putting aside some physical limitations, you pretty much can be anything. But are we teaching people how to find out what their intention is? Is that more the framework that we need to be having going? The first part of the framework is, what do you choose for your life? What is your intention? How are you going to leave the world a better place?
I start almost every class I teach, every coaching session I do with the AIM model of communication. Who is your audience? What is your intention? And then and only then, what is your message? And it was developed by Lynn Russell, who was at Columbia, Mary Munter, who was at Dartmouth at the time. But from a communication point of view, it is such a simple way to look at anything I'm going to share. Who is it I'm interacting with? And what is my intention in this interaction and in this relationship? And I've had a number of leaders come back and tell me it's a great communication model, but it's a great leadership model. That I need to be clear about what my intention is, and I need to understand who it is that I'm leading or partnering with or acquiring or hiring. Who is that other person, that other group of people, and what is my intention? And this much I know for sure, it's not a conversation that is prominent enough in business. And it definitely, it resonates when I have that conversation with people. And clients of mine, both coaching clients as well as companies that I go in and do training and leadership development for, come back and say, it made a difference. You gave us language that we could keep having the conversation after you left. So absolutely, of everything we've talked about, that's probably the area I'm the most confident about. We need to help people be clear about their intention and then execute on that intention.
Because when we're talking about men feeling more lonely, lost, and not useful in society, that seems to all stem from not having a clear intention. Am I missing something there, or do we?
I'm pondering a little bit, because to think if I can come up with the counter argument for that. But yeah,
if you're lost, you don't know where you're going.
Yeah.
Or you don't know how to get to where you're going. I mean, well, one, you could know where you want to go, but you don't know how to get there. Or you could just not know where you are.
Yeah.
Or where you want
to
go.
And all of it comes down to understanding intention. Yeah.
We always end our conversations on something pretty profound. I love that.
I do too. I
think because the whole
key.
I think the whole point of this podcast and these discussions is to set a framework. And if we're going to set a framework, and we need to have a start for that. And as you say, when you're doing the AIM model, it's about the audience. Well, the audience would be where you are and where you want to be in your society, who you want to be associating with, and then your intention of what's your intention for your life. I mean, that's really important to know what your intention is. As a man, I think it's very important. And because I do think men connect a lot with power, and the power is the ability to act. And if you don't have a clear intention you don't have a clear intention, how can you act? How can you move forward in any specific direction?
Yeah. So I don't know that our listeners will be able to get this. We can describe it to them. But one of the things that I do each day is I set 2 intentions. Who is it that I want to be?
Mm-hmm.
And what is it that I want to experience? And I haven't updated this for a while. This is not today's date on there, but
we can't see the date. That's calendar,
fine. But I try to do it on my chalkboard as well. So for this particular day, I wanted to be open. That's what I was going to bring forward, and I wanted to experience contribution. And when I get stuck in the middle of a day, I'll then look at, okay, well, who am I being? Who did I say I wanted to be today?
Yeah.
And am I experiencing, in this case, contribution or acknowledgement or closure? Like what you can choose whatever words you want. And in my day planner, I write it right at the top. Who am I going to be? What do I want to experience? And as I get lost or crowded within the day, just like a North Star, I will come back to what is the intention for the day.
Yeah, I love that.
And it gives me that reminder of, what did I say I was committed to?
I love what you just used the word there. What am I committed to? Because even you're using that for the day, that you're committed to that, but and knowing you've got other things, bigger, longer term intentions that you're committed to as well. That's pretty profound as well from a framework. Is what are you committed to for your life? I mean, and maybe you don't know, as a young person, you might not know for the rest of your life, but what are you committed to for your foreseeable future at the moment, or as far as you're planning out your future, what are you committed to?
Yeah, within this season. And you can define season to be a quarter, a month, a year, until I finish grad school. But what am I committed to in this season?
Yeah.
And if people can get clear on that and supported in getting clear on that, it's a game changer, Damien. I really believe it's a game changer for young men as well as men of a certain age.
Yes, but I love how you put that, and that's that. I give each episode a quote, and I think that quote fits this episode really well. What are you committed to for this season? Whatever that season is for you, that's beautiful. That's because that's a great part of the framework. What are you committed to for this season? Well, I know you've got dinner sitting there brewing or already cooked, and you've got young children waiting to eat dinner with you. So maybe we'll wind up here, and so you can go and have your dinner and spend time with you. Thank you again for allowing your son, Josh, to come on the show. And it was great to see him. It was wonderful. Thank you for allowing that to happen.
It was a good surprise for all of us. And Damien, I just enjoy these conversations we have every few months. Thank you for finding me and for letting us connect as we do between Australia and California. And I look forward to the next conversation. Thanks so much.
Thank you for being part of the Share.Care community and helping people around the world prosper. You're creating a bigger pie for everyone to share. The more people contributing to the world being a better place, the better the world becomes, for others and for you.